Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. The goal is to move and b'simcha.
That's right. B'simcha.
Friday is the longest. But we're already getting close to the longest.
One day at a time.
Yep. All right. Here we go. Here we go. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchei Shabbos, prakim Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, and Yud Dalet, beginning with Perek Yud Beis. Perek Yud Beis is going to go through the final 3 of the 39 melachas. We are up to Havara, kindling a flame, Kibui, extinguishing a flame, and Choitzah, transferring from domain to domain. But we're going to have a lot of details, at least beginning in Perek Yud Beis, regarding Choitzah. So there's Midashus, Lidashus. You have the Daladamas, Bidashus Arabim, you have the concept of Akira, and Hanocha. It has to be a Shir, Hamoyel, Hazoirek, Hamoishet, Kila Achayodi, and many details. And we're going to continue learning both in Perek Yud Gimel and in Perek Yud Dalet more about Hoitzah. Let us begin. Chaver Perek Yud Beis. Perek Yud Beis has 19 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. It says that Rambam, Hamavit, kindling a flame, even only kol shehu, even the smallest amount, you're going to be chayiv. And just to begin with a chassidish word, that our mission in life is to kindle the flame within us and within our fellow yid. And when it comes to that flame, if you succeeded, which we could and we will, even kindling the smallest amount, that's it, you succeeded. Because that's it. Once the person is on fire, they're on fire. So even kosher is kosher. Now, says the Rambam, v'hu sheyehei tzarech le'efen. However, if you don't want the ash, now the Rambam is going to speak soon, my friends, about kindling a flame for cooking. That will be different. Then there'll be another shear. But if you're kindling, there has to be some constructive purpose. Then you're going to be potter. Why? Because of the rule. Because you are mekalkel. Verstehst? So the Magadishna adds, if we're looking to have some constructive purpose, if you're putting a fire, if you're lighting a fire to have something cooked, it has to be only going to be chayv if you put enough, or if you kindled enough fire, kadei levashel beitza. Now, hamavel gedisha shel chavedim. If a person is setting fire to the grain pile of his friend, or if a person, God forbid, is burning down the house of his friend, then you're chayiv. Afal pi shehu mashches. You're not planning to cook. You don't need to have the ashes, but mepnei shekavanosai. This is already the 3rd time we're having this concept. The person vents his rage. And this is like someone who's renting his garments al mesai. So the act of tearing is an act of kilkel. You're going to be chayv chatos. Why? Because you have to do it. You have to do kriya. Or if a person, God forbid, is angry and they're externalizing it by rendering a garment, ripping a garment. While he's in a fight with his friend. Because you're misaknin hein eitzel yitzron hara. Now, if a person is lighting a candle, or wood, whether it's to get warm from it, whether it is because you need its light, then you're chayiv because this is not an act of kilkel. Okay, if you are heating up iron in order to strengthen it, because that was the way. First you heat it up and then you put it into water and that strengthens it. Hadeza told us mavid, and you are chayiv. I just want to point out that if in the sugya, if you remember, the Gemara quoted that Braisa that says that all of the mekalkel and are peturim chutz michayv lo mavid. And Rabbi Yechon disagrees with that, if you remember, and the Rambam passes like Rabbi Yechon. In other words, according to other opinions in the Gemara, it happens to be that by kindling a flame, it doesn't bother me that there is a kilkel involved. But the Rambam is making it clear there has to be some tzorech in it. Constructive. It has to be a constructive act. Very good. Okay. Halacha base. Hamachaba kolshu. Now in the reverse. Kindling, now extinguishing. Kolshu. It's however mamish until now the shiur needed for the one side is the same shiur for the other side. So extinguishing even only kolshu chayiv. Whether you're putting out a candle, whether you're putting out a gachel shel eitz. But if you're putting out a coal made out of metal, there takets asim ledrabanan, but you're not going to be violating a biblical violation. Why not? For people who have the chayelu, so he quotes in the bottom from Rabbi Avram, the son of the Rambam, who says the following: that when you have a fire that's fueled with wood and you put it out, then you are creating a charcoal, which is considered a new entity. That's why you're chayiv. But if it's made out of metal and you extinguish it, it's not considered a change. Unless, like we said before, if you heated it up to put it into coal to purify it, that's something else. Since you're not making something new, that's why here the Rambam differentiates. Okay, right. But if the intent of extinguishing it, like we just quoted here in the footnote, is that's the way blacksmiths would better their metals, making it stronger. At first, and then it seals it or it strengthens it. Who told us you are, now that we established that putting out a metal coal is only us in the Rabbanan, again, we're going to learn. Now it's not about sad. Now it's about hezek harabim. If you have that in the public domain, you are a little mutter to put it out. In other words, the Chachamim didn't even give it Issa the Rabbanan to begin with. It's only Issa the Rabbanan. For people not to get hurt, you can put out a metal glowing coal. If you add oil inside a already lit lamp, you're chayiv mishum mavid, and b'hamistapik min hashem and shabanet. If you remove oil from a lit candle, you're chayiv mishum achaben. Like here, if you remember, Tosfos holds, no, that's called gram kibui. It's not direct. If I add oil, if I take out oil, I'm not adding to the flame right now. I'm just going to extend its life. Gram kibui is not going to be a problem, certainly not on a biblical level. But the Rambam paskins, like those who hold that when you add or when you take out, at that moment, you change the quality of the light. Remember that? We learned this not that long ago in the Gemara. You dim the lights when you take out oil. And that happens immediately. And for that, you're chayiv. Let's go back to it. If a fire breaks out. So we already said before that if the reason why you're putting it out is because you want to save your house, then you're chayiv. You're losing a few $1 million here for your closet in LA. And we said, if there's even a suffix ibud nefashos, put it out. The gadol. But if there's no one is going to die, you may not do it. So therefore, make sure all the people leave the home when it's possible. Again, we're saying this clear because every house was really standalone. It's not going to extend to the neighbor's neighbor. The amichu eish the light and lost the flyer flock it in. Let him bring out the ganze Medina zol brennen. All right, halacha dalid mutter. However, even though you may not put it out, but there are certain things you are allowed to do. Now that Rambam is going to speak about gram kibui. That what you can make a mechitza b'chol hakelim bein b'leim bein ikonim kedei shalei taver ad leik. I'm not putting out the fire here, but I see the fire is going in the direction. The wind is blowing toward the north, so I put a couple of feet away kelim. So when the fire hits those kalim, it puts like a firewall. And even if you're going to put kalei cheres chadosh and mayim, and they crack when it gets hot, so the water is going to spill out. And even though it's a vadai, why is that? Shigram kibui muter. Now, just to add, whether the Rambam argues or not, that the Mordechai says, when do we say gram kibui? Gram kibui is sicher not chayiv. The Rambam is saying gram kibui is mutter. So many Rishonim add it's only mutter because you're saving your house of being burnt. There has to be a tzoyrech, losing money. And in other scenarios of gram kibui, at least other Rishonim say explicitly, like the Mordechai, that it's pater avolaso. Another case, you can put a metal utensil on top of a fire. No, you see the fire, you see the ceiling getting blackened. It was too close to the ceiling. And you can put a metal plate to intervene between the fire and the flammable roof or ceiling. That you're allowed to do. Halacha hey. Similarly, other examples, all examples of gram kiboy, in all of these cases, you're saving money loss. Teva shido migdal, different types of wooden boxes. She'achas behem ha'ur, fire already caught on one side of them. You are allowed to bring the oir gedi, the goat skin. It has a koyach that if the fire is not huge, it's going to put out the fire. The fire won't be able to go into it. On the other side, you can put it on the side. Why? You're not doing it directly. Yes, when the fire will hit her, it will put the fire out. We're pushing the limits of gram kiboy. So there's already fire on a folded garment, and if you open it up and you shake it out before you put it on, it's that little fire, it can put it out. You can do that. Wow. In other words, you see from these examples, we're going from you doing an act that's going to cause the fire to be put out much later to not that much later. This is already the border. Many people will say, what are you talking about? That's putting it up. I'm not touching the fire. I'm grabbing the garment, and it's not obsecration. That's why he's saying, if, im kafsa kafs, right? If you're trying to God forbid, then open it up and read from it. Or another case, you can put water on the part of the scroll that the fire didn't catch. Now, says the Rambam, the Rambam is going to give you a scenario where the Rambam will differentiate whether you did something b'shikha or whether you did something b'meis. If you let a candle lit on top of a shelf, so the noyer is a tabla v'neifel, you can shake the shelf, and it's going to cause the candle to fall. And if it will be extinguished, it will be extinguished. Now here, the whole question here will be, guys, that's already called psikration. Because when you put a little lamp on the ground, so the answer here would be that it's a psikration. We don't have time to explain this right now, whether the Rambam subscribes to this, and that's the raya. We never learned these words in the Rambam yet. I know we didn't learn muksa yet. We didn't learn, we learned in the Perek Aleph. The Rambam spoke about psikration. He never spoke about the leinichale. That's one way to explain this. But if you put it on purpose, now I know, guys, we're only starting muksa and Perek Chav Dalet, Chafei, Chavav. If you put it on purpose, then how can you shake off the tavla when the tavla is a bus? Even after the lamp is already extinguished, which means, again, we're giving a heter that even when the fire is lit, means even according to Rab Shimon, that holds that once the fire went out, it went out. He doesn't subscribe to Migdus Katsoilo Ben Hashmashis. In the first case, by Shakach, we're being lenient. Even when the fire is lit. Again, it's because you're saving your house of getting burnt down. So we're putting aside certainly Suri de Rabbanan. Halacha Zayin. I know we had a whole chapter regarding Amir al-Akum. The Rambam is going to write it in the context of Kibbutz. If a goy is coming to put out a fire, so even though we're talking not allowed to tell him Kabe, can't tell him put it out, but we're not obligated to tell him don't put it out. In other words, we don't have to tell him anything, even though he's doing something for us. And like we pointed out when we learned, I think it was Sunday, that if he does something that is a mitzias that remains for me, then I can't have hana from it. That's part of the isur of Amir La'akum, even though I didn't tell him. Here, he's not doing something that's a mitzias. He's putting out the mitzias. He's putting out the fire. And there's a money loss. I don't have to get involved. But if a minor yid, then we don't allow him to do it. When do we have to stop him? If he's doing it, even though his father didn't tell him to do it, but he's doing it because he sees his father is in anguish and he's doing it for his father. That's a general rule when it comes to chinuch by very young children. But you're not allowed to be a dayim, give him something that's not okay. You can't be a dayim, bring him over to the switch, he should shut off the light. You can't do that. But if he's doing it on his own, then you don't have to stop him. And finally, even when it comes to a goy, even though we said we're not allowed to tell the goy kabe, can't tell the goy put it out, but you can make this remes. Here's the first time we're learning about a remes. You can tell a goy, listen, whoever will put out the fire won't lose anything. Which you are implying that you're going to give him something. Depends how many times you did that to him before. It depends how much, did you give him what your promises before? It might work if you trust. Halacha ches. Now, Chevra, finally, we are going to the 39th malacha. However, not in a good way, mamish, the way the Gemara, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, was misaded many parakim in Hilchos Shabbos regarding Chaitzah. The Rambam now, everything we had in the beginning of Shabbos, even though not in the Seder, is going to begin with Chaitzah. So there's going to be, like we mentioned, many details regarding Chaitzah on Perek Yud Beis, and we're going to continue today in Yud Gimel and in Yud Dalet. Halacha Ches, starting the final, it's the Rambam called it Chaitzah Mireshus L'Reshus. Chaitzah Mireshus L'Reshus, transferring an object from one domain to another domain. Now, what's a domain, guys? Wait until Perek Yud Dalet. We'll learn that today. We're going to leave that for later. From one domain to another domain. That is a malach ma'abis malachis. Now, va'af al pi shudavar zeh im kol gufei toira is mi pi moishe mi sinai nemru. However, Haitzah is actually more explicit in the written Torah more than the other ones. Harehu Omer, and he's quoting a pasuk in Vayakel, when Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yidden, Ish al yasu oid malach l'trumas hakodesh. Enough, don't bring any more donations. And what word did Moshe Rabbeinu use? Milacha. And what did the Torah write afterwards? People stopped bringing. That's a source specifically regarding transferring mireshus l'reshus, which is what happens when you donate something from your home and you go through the midbar and you go to give it to the Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though this pasuk is not connected to Shabbos, it doesn't matter. Moshe Rabbeinu referred to bringing donations, which is transferring. Don't do malach. This pasuk was donations that they were bringing was from one domain to the other. And indeed, in the Mishnah, in the Rambam, the 39th is called Chaitzah Mereshus L'Reshus. Included in Mereshus L'Reshus is carrying in the same Reshus Rabim. From oral tradition, if you transfer, right, a full 4 ames, and you chayv midoraisa, charaskila chatos, halachates. Now, let's go with Tushiyurim. Whatever you are transferring has to be an object that has a sufficient size to achieve that which you want from this object. Has to be chashuv. The words here is shir hamoyo. Number one. Number two, when it comes to Haitzah, Haitzah is comprised of 2 actions. If you have one action and not both, that's not called Chatzi Shir, which according to Rabbi Yechanan is Asur Midoraisa. You just don't get punished. This is called a Chatzi Melacha. Chatzi Melacha means on a biblical level, you're doing nothing. It's only Asur Midorabanan. What are the 2 actions? Guys, this is a great review today. We're learning half of Masechta Shabbos today. That V'yakoid Mideshuzu, these are the words. Akira. Akira literally means you uproot it. Means you lift it up. It was stationary, and now you're putting it into motion. And step number 2, which is part of the same malacha, the yaniach, and you put it down. And we're going to be using these words, akira and anacha. If you did the first step, or if you did the second step, you didn't put it up, or if you made a hakira and a hanacha, but it was less than the shiur hamoya, patur. Patur means you're chayiv midrabanan, right? Also, midivrei seifrim, but it's patur from a oynish. Same thing is hamaver mitchilas arba l'soif arba b'reshus harabim. That mipi ashmua is also included in this 39. Ein chayiv. You need to have these 2 things. It has to be akira and a hanacha, and it has to be a shiur hamoya. Then chayiv achiaka k'shiur. That there is a minimum amount, like almost all of the other Hilchos Shabbos. I know today we began with the kindling of flame, but other than that, b'tzad zeh v'yanicha b'tzad achetz. Now let's go next. Halacha Yud. Hazoyrek mireshus l'reshus. You didn't transfer, meaning you had something in your arm, in your hand, and then you walked it over. You threw it. Oy hamoishet. Hamoishet. It says the Maggid Mishnah that moishet means you're dragging an article on the ground. That's what the Rambam means. Hareza told us hamoitzi. It's as if you didn't drag it. It's as if you carried it, even though you threw it, or you dragged and you're chayiv. With all the same 3 conditions. It has to be an akira and a hanacha kishir hamoy. V'chein hazoyrek oy hamoyshet. Betchilas arba l'soif arba. Hareza told us hamoytzi v'chayiv. Then, however, hazoyrek la'achayad. If you throw it in an unusual way, and we're going to learn a lot about that later, just like when you carry kila achayad, you're going to be potter. Same rules will be also potter. Halacha Yudal. Another detail. If you transferred an object, but it wasn't the entire object, you're going to be potter. Guys, you have to remember this halacha Yud Aleph or Perek Yud Dalet when we're going to be speaking about the four domains, and you're bringing something. We're going to learn that the Reshus Harabim only goes up until 10 tefachim. If some of it was above the 10 tefachim, walking to it or in the 10 tefachim, this will be connected to this. Whenever you speak about transferring, it's about all of the object is in that second domain. And now what happens if you have a box or a basket that has in it many little shtikalach? You have candies in it. You have the mustard seeds. So some of the mustard seeds are fully b'reshus harabim. But the box, some of it is still b'reshus hayachid. So how do you view? The Rambam is going to say that everything that's in the box is considered box. And if some of the box or the container is still in the original reshus, even though the individual items or many of them, which is enough kishir hamaylos, and the other reshus, you're going to be potter. Chardal is very little. And most of it you took out from one reshus to the other. But the sum of the boxes in the original domain, potter, because the keli makes everything into one thing. Halacha Yud Beis. If you take out something with your right hand or your left hand, or whether it's a cheka, you have it in your bosom, or you have money that are tzerurim, or the money is besedina, you just have all of the usual ways of you carrying this specific item, then you're chayiv. Furthermore, if you put something on your shoulder, you're chayiv. People carry stuff on their shoulders. And my shoulders are above 10 tefachim. We're going to learn in 2 chapters from now that above 10 tefachim is not considered the Reshus Harabim. When am I chayiv chatos min Reshus hayachad Reshus Harabim? Let us say that if something is on my shoulder, it's above 10 tefachim. We don't say that. Because everything is ultimately learned from how things were transported. As it says, guys, this is Parshas Nasu. Right, the Bnei Kahas were not given the wagons. They carried everything on their shoulders. So we view your shoulder as if it's on the ground. And if the ground is Reshus Harabim, boom, then you have Reshus Harabim. Halacha Yud Gimel. All right, just like he said at the end of Halacha Yud, that's really coming from here. That hamoitzi, the normal carrying out, if you do it in an unusual way. Now, many people have a girsa here, beragloi. If you're learning the chayenu, they took it out. That was a mistake. I think everyone has. You took it out on the other side of the hand, or you took something out with your foot, or you took something out in your mouth, or b'marpeko, you had it in your elbow bend, or in your ear, or in your hair. Or if you had a kiss, you're talking about big day, or kiss lamatam. If you have some sort of pocket or wallet that's turned upside down, now people would do that because the mouth, the opening of that pocket is very narrow. Just explaining. So it would serve as a proper pocket for some articles, but it's very unusual for people to take things out. But even large art, it can fall out. Or if you carry something between 2 garments, you don't have a pocket, but you're squeezing it in between your kapata and your shirt. Or you're squeezing it in between your shirt and your undershirt, your talis cotton. Or in the hem of your garment. Look inside the hem of your kids for Pesach. You'll see stores of candies in there. You're in your shoes or in your sandals. All of this is pater. Is he
saying that it's if you carry it in an unusual manner, or is he listing the specific manners that he considers unusual?
Very good. So certain things halacha considers unusual, and certain things will depend on the makom, as we'll have in halacha yudalat, exactly, which is carrying on your head. And that's how do we view the world. There are some places in the world that people carry everything on their heads, but the Roiv of the Oilam only carry certain things on their head. So let's go. If you're schlepping something on your head, if it's something very heavy, like a sack, and not only do you carry it on your head, but to lean it, to make sure that it doesn't fall off, to give it its support. You also grab onto it with your hand. That's chayiv shkein darach. And the nimtzak might say, it's like carrying something on your shoulder. However, it's kal, but if you take something that's very light, for example, a garment or a knife or a book, and you put it on your head and you take it out, and even if you're not holding onto it with your hand, which means that your head is going to get full support, still you're going to be potter. Now, surely the Rambam wants to add over here, if you are in a location that dear people don't do it. Some places people do it. You go after Roiv Oilam. Next, here we're going back into something that we're going to learn in Perek Yud Daled, my friends. That Lamayla Masora Tvachim Reshus Harabim is not Reshus Harabim. Doesn't matter if it's on your body, like we quoted by Kosev Yiso, on your shoulder, on your head. You got a problem. Within the 4 amas, you can transport something. Now, my friends, until the end of this Perek, let me say it by heart, there are 2 huge leniencies that we're going to have regarding this 4x4. Number 1, normally, we do say shiyurim over here. Amma, like we said yesterday, we've been learning about the sit and the zeres. And amma means from the tip of my middle finger until the end of my elbow. That's my amma. Do you measure those 4 ammas based on my ammas? Which would mean that if I'm an oig malach habash and a giant, I can carry much more. So the answer is lekula, yes, lechumra not. So the midget won't be limited to smaller 4 ammas. But if punkt du bist allein gelakshen, you'll have more. That's number 1. I'll say the whole Perek until the end. Number 2, another big leniency. When you say 4x4 ammas, how do you measure it? Don't forget the diagonal of 4 ammas. There's a Talmudic formula. The formula is kol amsa biribua is amso trei chumsha amsa ba'alach soina, which means that 4x4 ammas, if you were to measure the diagonal, you would get very approximately close to 5.6 ammas. So we're going to actually see that we're going to give within 4x4 mamish mutter. If it's less than the diagonal, because I'm going to argue, let me make it a diagonal, you're not going to be chayiv. You're only going to be chayiv if it's the 4x4 will become 5.6. Now let's read everything inside. Says the Rambam that in middle of Tezvav, guys, lakula, which means if you're a giant, and your arm is not the 18 inches or the 19 inches. Your arm from the middle finger until the tip of your elbow, I don't know, let's say by you, it's 24 inches, 2 feet. So you know what? You have the 2 feet times 4. Yeah, you have the 4 amps. On the other hand, if you are a nanas be'ivarav, if you are a midget, then we do give you the leniency. We give you a larger 4 amps. Another thing, when it says in Parshas B'Shalach, Shvu Ishtachtov, Shvu Ishtachtov means that in the 4 ammas you can do what you want. Which means that you are, as we're going to see soon, in real 4x4 ammas, Shuki, you can mamish be metaltal lachatchila. If you have 2 people and they are near each other in the public domain, and therefore ammas overlap one with the other, my friends, in the overlapped area, they can share their stuff. Mixas arba amashozel lotech arba amashozel. You can bring food in the middle. One person cannot carry it into the others. But I am allowed to carry it even though this area overlaps with the other. There's a chiddush, because you might think that we're going to be chayish, that if I'm allowed to carry it into the overlapped area, I might carry it into your 4 ammas, which is beyond my 4 ammas. We don't say that. Furthermore, if there are 3 people and the one in the middle overlaps with the one to the right and the one to the left, you know what? The one in the middle can bring into, everyone can take up their complete 4 ammas. Even though the guy to the right has no overlap with the guy to the left, and they may not bring their things into the one to the left. But we're not afraid that if you're matter them to do in the overlap, they'll go beyond it. However, Halacha 17, since I'm allowed to bring my thing into the overlap, now guys, unlike we're going to learn next week in Hilchos Eruvin, when it comes to the Tchum Shabbos, that an item is koine shvisa, the item cannot go beyond the 2,000 amos of its owner, not when it comes to transferring. So imagine there's a train of people, every person is within the 4 amos of the other. If I can bring it into the overlapped area and put it down there, because I picked it up within my 4 and I put it down within my 4, but then that's also within your 4, you can pick it up and move it further. The third guy can pick it up and move it further. As long as every person is keeping that item within their daladamas, you can take an item and move it 1,000 miles on Shabbos. Mutar lechatchila. Wow.
Does this item have to change ownership every time?
No, it does not. It does not. So I guess, Rabbi Chaim, when it comes to Hilchas Eruvin, we don't say this. That's the Chiddush. By Eruvin, the item is bound to the 2,000 amas of the owner. Here we're speaking about you carrying in a city. Here it's not about Tchumen. Here it's about Hoitzah. As far as Hoitzah, I don't care who the owner is. Clear. Mutter, not potter only. Mutter. Beautiful. Really, I'm allowed to carry within the square 4x4. So therefore, it comes out that if I'm I'm going to carry in the diagonal, guys. When you make a perfectly square box, but you measure the diagonal is going to be a lot bigger than the 4. How much will it be? It'll be 5 amas and 3/5. 3/5, my friends. Here, I'm just saying it's going to be 5.6 amas. But when the Rambam says, you know what the word chayiv means? What does ein chayiv mean? Ein chayiv doesn't mean mutter. Ein chayiv means you're not chayiv but pater. What's this leniency that the 4 amas grows to within 5.6 is only to take away the doiraisa, but it means also the rabban. That's, in other words, you have 4x4. If I carried it less than 4 amas, Danny, mutter. But the Rambam is writing in Halacha Yudches that really the 4x4 you go by the diagonal. So the 4x4 is really 5.6 by 5.6 because no matter where I'm carrying it in the diagonal of the 4x4. That only takes away the Chiyav Doiraisa. You're not Chayiv. When will you be Chayiv? You're not Chayiv, but it's awesome. What does Chayiv mean? The im heaven pachos mizeh, then you're only potted. So in other words,
through the circle.
So you make a circle. You make a circle of wherever du bist, wherever you are, and the circle is really that from the diagonal of the circle is 5.6. The diagonal of the circle, because if you have a 5.6 circle, you can insert in it a box of 4x4, and the corners won't protrude outwards.
The biblical Daled Amas is a square.
The biblical Daled Amas is actually a circle. That's what we're saying. The rabbinic Daled Amas is a square.
Well, I'm saying it's the opposite. Meaning, the rice they give you a square. But
I'm sorry. I think I'm
the circle.
That Rabbanan. Okay, very good. So the Rambam says, Shuki. Let's go with the words of the Rambam. So the bottom line is that Halacha Yudches only takes it away. It means if you are within the 5.6, it's not mutter, you're not chayiv. Biblically, you have a circle, but rabbinically, you only have a square, not to violate. So therefore, if you pick something up in the public domain and you put it down in another place in the public domain, if from the Akira to the Hanacha, it was ad arba, it was a drop less than 4 amas. Then a drop less than 4 amas. Now you're mutter. Mutter means not even midrabanan, not even midrabanan. You violated nothing, and like we mentioned before, so I can carry something less than 4 amas. Just look what the item is. The item is here. Carry it less 3.9 amas. Then if that happens to be within you, where you are, you carry it 3.9 and 3.9 and go come a mil. If you been from the place of the Akira to the place of the Anocha, 4 amas or more, but it's still within the Chamesh amas, Ushloish Chumshei Amma, it's still within the 5 3/5 of an Amma, which is 5.6 amas. Even though I'm violating rabbinic law, I didn't violate biblical law because biblical law, it's a circle. That's what God meant when he told him Yechayev. Perikut Gimel, like we mentioned in the beginning, today it's all about Hoitzah. So we learned many details in Perikut Beis, but now we're going to be learning about the whole idea of Dalid al Dalid, that you have to pick it up from a place that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. You have to put it down on a place that's 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, even though the Yad Shel Adam doesn't have 4 tefachim. We'll see exceptions to that. We're going to be learning throwing it from the Shus HaYachid to the Shus HaYachid to the Shus HaRambam be'emtza. Rishus Rabam to Rishus Rabam, Rishus Hayachid be'emtza. Guys, these are many dafim in Masechta Shabbos. So let's go. The Perek Yud Gimel has 22 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Says the Rambam, Ein hamoitzim rishus l'rishus. This isur, this malacha of transferring an object from one domain to the other, or 4 amas b'rishus harabim, chutz la'arba amas chayiv. When is that? Guys, remember this. At sheyakord me'al gabi makim sheyesh by arba'a tfachim al arba'a tfachim. If you lifted it up, you made the akira, the object was stationary. On what? I don't care on what substance, but I care size. On something that was at least 4 by 4 tfachim. Guys, just to remember a mnemonic. There's 4 amas and 4 tfachim. How do you remember which is which? So arba, aleph, reish, beis, ayin is amas. Whenever there's an added hey, remember this. Arba'ah, that's tfachim. Has to be 4 by 4 tfachim or more. So the akira has to be ma'al makim arba'ah al arba'ah, and you have to put it down on a place arba'ah and arba'ah. So now the problem will be, we all learned the first Mishnah on Shabbos, right? The balabas and the ani, you're taking it from his hand, you're putting it on his hand. My hand, maybe when you open up your fingers in one direction, you can say it's more than a tefach. It's not 4 by 4 tefach. So says the exception, says halacha beis, yadish aladam, the hand of a person, it's like 4 by 4. And therefore, if I uprooted something from your hand, let's say you're standing outside, and I took something off your hand and I put it in the hand of someone who's standing in another domain, I'm chayiv. Even though both the akira and the hanacha was just from a hand, the hand is chashuv like arba'ah. This is not the only exception. If you're standing in any one of these 2 domains, the domains we're going to speak about in the next chapter. So the Rambam is beginning here, on at least here, he's leaving things for later. And I am standing in my house and I extend my hand outwards, and I took the object out of the street on the ground of the Rishus Harabim, or from a person who's standing there. I didn't put it down on someone else's hand. Guys, halk up. I didn't put it down on someone else's hand. I just brought it to me. I'm also chayiv. I lifted it up, either from the ground or from your hand, but the guy was passive. I lifted it up from your hand, and I brought it into me. So he's covering everything. First of all, hand is like arba'ah. Number 2, I have to make an akina hanocha. Did I make a hanocha? Yes, I did. Because now my hands stopped moving. My hands now go, my feet are stationary. And I'm standing on the ground indoors. Let's say it's from Rishus Harabim to Halacha 3. If I'm eating while I'm walking out from my house to the street, and the chashab lo chaytzi ha'oichel shebefei b'rishus l'rishus. Don't forget, we learned about mesasek. We learned about melechas machshavos. He's adding it in. If I'm mindful about it, I knew that I have something in my mouth. Is a mouth 4 by 4? Yes, for here, the same idea. Chayiv. It's a side of mesasek. The fact that I intended to carry something while I'm eating it, I didn't use the word carrying it, but I'm eating it. And I'm carrying it. It's going with me. That makes it chashuv karba. In America, kederach hamitzin. Another example. Person is in one of these 2 domains, and he's urinating, or he's spitting into the other domain. The question is, it's not coming mimakayim arba'ah. The fact that I did that mindfully, it's a machshavit as if it's arba'ah. There's no 4 by 4. However, if a person is indoors and the tip of their member is outside already, and then they urinated, they're potter. So asur midrabanan, because we don't look. I remember that whole story. We don't look at the bladder. The bladder is inside the house, but the piham is outside the house, so it only made the akira already b'rishus harabim. If you're standing in one of these 2 domains, and you extended your hand to the other domain, they're not only shamayim, and you took water that's al gabe guma malayim. You took water from a pit which is full of water. On your chayev. What's the chiddush? Then you said you have to make an akira from 4 by 4. How do you view the water on top of the well? Where is it resting on? If you were to view the water on top of the pit as if the water itself was floating, then the water was never stationary. Then you would not be chayiv. but we view the whole water as if all of it is laying on the bottom of the pit, which is on the ground. However, in contrast, if there was a keli tzaf lagabamayim, if there is a cup floating on the water, and you have peiros in the keli, right outside your door, but it's a bit of shusarabi, right? And you put your hand out there, and you took the peda, you took the apple that's floating in the bowl, that's floating on the water. You didn't make a real akida, because it wasn't even stationary, it wasn't even resting, it was floating. In other words, anything that's moving is going to be excluded from the chiyuv d'oraisa because of arba. How can you say arba? It wasn't stationary; it was moving.
Why do you need arba? Why is it
because that's the meaning. Because we include it in that. No, that's the pshat.
Considered an akira.
No, it's not an akira. No, that's the meaning. If something is not stationary, or if something is stationary, unless they're not arba, it's the same thing. It's not called stationary.
The keli is not arba, right?
Even if the keli is arba speaker. Even if the keli is arba, the fact that it's floating on water, very good.
But doesn't when he pick it up, it become inside his hand, which is arba in the Rosh Hashanah?
No, but once it came into your hand, not from a not, if it was already moving, then it's not a biblical violation. It has to be stationary for you then to say you made an akira. Even more if the fruits themselves were floating on the water. That's it, because by the keli, there was one sheet in the Gemara that says that the keli is stationary. You're oiked from the keli, and then you would say that if the keli has 4x4, you're chayim. We don't even say that. There's no need to say if the fruit is directly on the water. If there's oil floating on water, water is one gush. Oil and water are two different things. And if you scooped up the oil, so we don't say the shemen was laying on the bottom of the pit. No, the shemen is floating on top of the water. There was no proper, it was not stationary. Thus, you had no akira. Thus, you're not chayiv midorais. Allah chafat. Kfar omanu, she'eno moitzim in the shus chayiv at sheyakar v'yanich. You have to have both akira and anach. Aval amakar v'lo niach. If you only did one, or hinich v'lo yakar, you're potter. Therefore, give a half cup over here. If you are standing in one domain, I'm always going to use the example like the Mishnah that the balabais is standing indoors, and he extended his hand with something, and the notal achar mimen, the ani outdoors took it from your hand. Halskop, yeah? That means you did not do the hanacha. They took it. Now, we already learned before that when they take it and they're standing, that is the hanacha, but they made the hanacha. Or the opposite, you put your hand out, you put like the ani put his hand inside the house, and the balabas put something in the hand of the ani. But you understand, but the hand of the ani is still in the house. So you, the balabas, when you put it in the hand of the ani, it's still under the reshus hayachid. He took it out, but when he took it out, you can't say he made the akira. He didn't make the akira. You made the akira. He only did the hanacha. Guys, this is the first Mishnah Meshech L'Shabbos. Hold your heads. That what? That the one who took it is potter. In my case, that the ani who put his hand in the house, and you put it in his hand. So he didn't do akira, and then he put his hand out. That he's potter. That's only that if the hand was above 3 tefachim off the ground.
He took his hand and put it down, or he just
the hand in the house, he doesn't have to put it down. The fact that he's stationary and he's not walking, that's called the hanach. That's the whole sug. The first 5 daf of Shabbos is all about the hand over here.
And the Rosh that he's reaching his hand into is closer
to the ground. Very good, which means, and then
on the ground.
Very good. The Rambam is speaking about the opposite case, but both akira and the halacha, any lavud. I want you to know that the Rambam here doesn't speak about the hand touching the ground, but within 3 tefachim, which has the din of lavud. We're going to learn today. The Rambam is very lenient. In many other cases, he's going to say that not only does it have to be within 3 tefachim of the ground, it has to touch the ground, even if it's not stationary on the ground, as we'll see soon. But here it doesn't make any mention of it touching the ground. Halacha 7.
Quick clarification. if it's okay.
Quick.
There's akira and hanacha. Hanacha can be movement of hand. Akira has to be an action. Does that make sense?
Hanacha is taking
Hanacha could be
something.
your hand stopping to move. That's considered hanacha.
Hanacha means something is now stationary. How do you define stationary? So halacha says that if it's your hand and your body, if your feet are stationary, even if my hands are moving, it's called a hanacha.
Got it. But having something in your hand is not considered an akira. You need to move something.
Akira is only if I took it up from a place that was stationary. Very good. So 1 second. So therefore, Rabbi Chaim, if my hand is in someone else's domain and they put it into my hand, that's what we are just saying. We don't say that that's the hanacha. And now, therefore, when I take it out, I made akira and hanacha. As long as my hand is lamayla mishloisha, shloisha, or above, not lamaisha, 3 or above, then the akira already happened. All I did is the hanacha. If I'm in one of these 2 domains, and my friend extended his hand from another domain, and he took a chayfetz miyadzam reshuzum, right? He took something from my hand and he brought it to him. Or if someone's standing out, I'm standing indoors, and I move my hand out and I put it in the hand of the ani. What did the ani do? Nothing. I put it in his hand. The one who was standing did nothing. The chaveiroi did everything. The chaveir is chayiv. Again, based on the rule that a hand is like 4 by 4. That means if I put my hand outside and I put bread in the hand of an ani, I made the akira and I made the hanacha. Very good. Allah ches. To make things more exciting, Kevin has pictures which confuse you more than the Rambam. Allah ches. If you stand one of these, it's good. We need some joy over here. Al-Gabad means something was put on the back of your hand. Okay. Same thing. In other words, if something was placed in my hand, when my hand was in one domain, it was already placed in my hand, and then I walked into another domain, me beginning to walk is the akira, me stopping to walk is the hanach. I did both. I'm chayiv. Akira's gufay. When my body begins to move, when there's something on my body that's not a garment, that's called carrying, is kakira's achayfetz mo'ish reshus. My stopping my legs, va'amidose ba'ois achayfetz kanach as I have as a karkosh above. From walking with something in my hand or on the other side of my hand, but I didn't stop. Imagine I'm in my house and I'm walking in and out, As long as I didn't stop, I did nothing yet biblically. Because you made a akira. When did I make the akira? When I moved my feet, when I was standing in my house, the moment I moved outside holding something, that's the akira, but I didn't stop. Now he's saying another nuance. If a person stops while they are carrying something, but the kavanah of their stopping is to affix it better. You have a backpack, you have something on your head, and you want to straighten it out. That's not called stopping. And we're going to use that consistently. Even if you stop, but you only stop l'saken amasik, Amed l'saken is not stopping. Only if you stop to rest. That's called stopping. Stopping here would be a hanach. Halacha tes. Similarly, if you have something on your back and you're running the entire day. So what did we learn? Dalad amas b'reshus Rambam is also chayiv. But as long as you're running, in a chayiv b'tshiyamot. Now the Rambam has a chumrah here, and he says that you have to be running. If you're walking, you're not going to be chayiv, but it's going to be awesome. If you're walking your regular way, it's not midaraisa, because Chazal were afraid that when you have something on your back, if you are not doing something unusual for yourself to remind yourself, I have something in my hand, I may not stop. You might stop accidentally. Okay. The typical example: you are going to your destination. You're walking with something. You thought you'll make it there before Shabbos. You didn't. It's Shabbos right now. And it's worth a lot of money. So one solution will be run until you get home. So you're not doing, when Shabbos came in, you are already in motion. You didn't even make an akira here. And when you get to your destination, now you're only going to be making a hanach, which is to begin with asur midrabanan. So another thing that Rambam holds, that you should throw it into your home kala achayat. Okay. And why do you need?
There's no akira
One second.
because it was done before Shabbos.
Yes. because you were in motion. So here, very good. The only problem here is that now the question is, why do you even have to do it kala achayad? Many commentators say because the Rambam is afraid that a person might stop the moment they come home when they're still outside. And even if you made a stop, even if you made a hakira, then you're doing kala achayad. If you were something was in the public domain, and you walk less than the arba amas, guys, the arba amas that we learned at the end of last chapter, you walked 3.9. That means you didn't even violate carrying midrabanan. And then you walked another 4 amas, and then you walked another 4 amas. You know what the din is? Muta. But let's be consistent. When is it mutar? Only if you stop to rest, right? We just said if you stop to adjust a garment, it's not called stopping. If that's not called stopping, it's going to be a chumrah here. Then this is not a pause. The next time you'll stop will be the hanach. And therefore, when you will stop chutz la'arba amas, then you'll be chayiv. But when will you be chayiv? If when you stop in the next stop, you're doing it lanuach. We're very consistent with this halacha. Halacha yudal. If you have a pole or a spear, right, which is very big, a very skinny, long or tall utensil, and it's laying on the ground, and you picked up you picked up one side, so you have an item, and the way you're moving it, chavra, is that you're going like this. You're going like this. That means you never picked all of it up. You only picked up one side, and you pushed it forward. You never were oiked at lagamri. There was always some of it on the ground. And you pick up the other end and you pushed it ahead. Until you moved it many kilometers, you did not violate a biblical violation. Why? Because a akira means all of it was lifted up. But that's because some of it was stationary. What happens if you b'chlal did not lift it up, but you're dragging it? Then you're chayiv. This is the kasha of the Maganishna who says before about Moshe, the Rambam, when he speaks about dragging, he uses the words garai. But anyway, let's go back. Notice when you're rolling something, when I'm rolling something, the entire article is moving at the same time. Halacha Yud Beis. Now let's speak about intent. If I'm in my house and I lifted up something, when I lifted it up, my intention was to put it down in my house, which means that this akira was a akira hamuteres. We don't call that an akira. Herst Yidden. When I picked it up, my intention was to put it down in my house. Then I just changed my mind. I forgot it was Shabbos. And now I decided, it's already in my hand. I might as well take it to my neighbor. The nimlach baderech in your home, while you're already in motion. You're going to be exempt from a biblical level. When you picked it up, it wasn't the kavanah to put it down. The nim says, kan hanacha, without a biblical akira. Another example where there is no akira, I picked something up and I put it on my friend when my friend was already in motion. So there's no hanacha now. And then I'm going to take it off the back of my friend when he's still in motion. Prior to my friend stopping, even though I picked it up, so I made an akira, but that's not called putting it down because it was not stationary. See, unlike speak, when you put something in my hand when my feet are on the ground, I don't care if my hand is moving. My hand goes after my feet. But if my feet are moving, then there's no hanach yet. I'm throwing something. Now, someone else caught it, or a dog caught it prior to it resting, or it got burned, potted. Now, you can argue it fell, someone else grabbed it, so that's a hanach. No. That was not the intended hanach. I want to add another nuance we're going to learn later. If you're playing American football, then even if my intent was not to win, but I'm playing with my son, I want him to catch it. If he was not standing in the location where he caught it, that also won't be called a hanach. We're going to get to that later. But here he's not focusing on that. He's focusing it on the fact that if I wanted it to fall on the ground and it made its resting in a place to which I did not intend, just like the akira has to be with intent, the hanach also. Lefikach im nischaven b'shas zrika lekach means if I'm playing ball and you're stationary, then I'm going to be chayiv.
But the dog, if that was your intent.
Then I'm going to be chayiv if the dog did not move. You need to have dalad dal dalad. We said the same thing. Even if it's in the mouth of a dog. Machshavta yishal adam. That's what we learned before. Is machshav that place. Halacha 14. If I threw something, but there was that item has a string, and the string is in my hand, I will never be chayiv midoiraisa. As if I'm able, after it rests, for me to push it back to me. That's called pater. Sharei en kan anochi gemura. Many people do this with their kids. They never give the kids independence. They think so. They try to convince their kids, but they have the string in their hand. That's terrible. And no, you don't let them up. The name says, how are you saying, Dina?
Sorry, going back for a second. If I want to get my ball to my neighbor's house, they don't have a ball. They have an Eruv. Can I have two kids like throw until we get to the Eruv section?
Don't do that.
Is it allowed?
If there's many different, going from one domain to the other without an Eruv is not going to be allowed. Here,
there's no Eruv, but the place that they want the ball has an Eruv.
Doesn't matter. You can't go from one domain to the other. You can't do that. Halacha tezva. Here, if I threw something in the land of my fellow's friend, here's the key. Here's another nuance. Forget about intent. Let's go to it. If I threw it to you and it fell into your hand, who did the hanacha? I did the hanacha. But the imneker chaverim imekoyim v'kiblo patu. Even though it fell in my friend's hand, since the makom of its resting was not there when I threw it, I'm going to be exempt from a biblical obligation. And therefore, the same thing to me. What happens if I throw a ball over there and I run and I catch it? Same idea. Zajac, I threw something high up, more than Dalal Damas, and I run and I'm a kabel it. Either in someone else's domain or in Chutz Arba Ames, I'm also going to be pater. Just like we learned in the beginning of Halacha Tezvav. What's the place of its resting needed to be there while I made the Akira.
That's the machshavas.
That's for there to be a Hanoch and Gemura. Machshavas means, if I threw it and I wanted it to land on the ground, even if you did not move, but you stuck your hand out and you grabbed it, I'm also going to be pater because I didn't want it to land in your hand. That's the machshavas. Here I'm throwing it in a place and I wanted you to catch it, but like playing ball, but I needed for you to run a little bit. I'm also going to be pater because the place of the hanacha was not present when I threw it. Now we're beginning another topic. I'm throwing it from one Rishus Yachid to Rishus. Now in the Kiyur case Dina, really from one private domain to another private domain to begin with, there is no biblical violation of transfer. That's another topic. So now I'm going to focus on that. So I'm throwing it from Rishus Yachid to Rishus Yachid. Let's take out the Yisuri de Rabban. Problem here is that there was a public domain in between. Since it did not rest in the Rishus Harabim, pater. And why pater? Because you can't transfer Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Hayachid if they belong to two different people. But when do we say that I'm pater? Here we go, guys. This nuance. Only if the item, when it flew through above 3 tvachim. 3 tvachim or higher from the ground of the public domain. But if it flew within, guys, the Rambam is very lenient. He adds something. It's not enough that it was within within less than 3 tvachim off the ground, but it also has to rest here, even though it was not on something that's 4x4. But it needs to rest, even though it rested for a second. And the nekar, or it didn't rest at all. It kept on rolling. It was just rolling. And the yotza if it's within 3 and the nach, you know what I actually did? I did Rishus Hayachid Rishus Harabim, and then Rishus Harabim Rishus Hayachid. I'm also going to be pater. Now, guys, halt up. You know what I'm pater? Listen to this. I'm only pater if in the Rishus Harabim we combine them together. If I don't have the dalad by dalad, if it went 3 amas in this Rishus Harabim, I don't care about the Rishus HaYachid, I get that. But it went 3 amos of the other Rishus HaRabim. Forget about the Rishus HaYachid. Then I did more than the Daled amos with Rishus HaRabim. Then I'll be Chayiv. Pater means I'm Pater because it's not transferring from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid back into Rishus HaRabim. But the Im Avar HaChaytis by Pachas Mishleishu Samach, same thing. If in the private domain, it was, first of all, less than 3 tvachim, and a nachamol, the nach al gabe mashu, even though it began to move. And therefore I'm going to be chai. Halacha Yud Zayin. Hamavid arba amas b'rishus harabim. Zu im rishus harabim shnei. I carried something into 2 different public domains. That's the key we made before. We combined them. Chayiv. Mepnei she'arba amas b'shtei rishus harabim do combine. If it would stop in middle, it would break it. But I didn't. It went straight. Halacha Yud Ches. Hamoishet is passing. Hamoishet rishus hayachid. I'm passing over. Okay, mamish your case dina v'rishus harabim be'emtza. Now look at this. Look at this nuance over here. So it's from rishus hayachid to rishus hayachid. There's a rishus harabim. Here, the item. See, there's something stationary. The person who's carrying is stationary. He's just carrying from here to there. In the Mishkan, they had wagons on one side of the road, and they would transfer the beams from one wagon to the other. The wagon had a din of a rishus hayachid, as we'll learn in the next chapter. There, the road had a din of a rishus harabim, and that's called the malacha. But that's only because they were on the same side. Ironically, here we see it has to be exactly the same. If there's a rishus hayachid on one side and a rishus hayachid on the other side, and there's a rishus harabim be'emtza, and someone is not moving, they're stationary, but they're bringing it from here and putting it there, that's not like the desert. Let's go read inside. You're chayiv, even though you are transferring it over the rishus of the over the ear of the rishus harabim, which means even though it's going above 10 tefachim off the ground. Why are you chayiv? Because that's what they did in the Beis Hamikdash. That they were moishit and a sakroshin. They would transfer over the beams that became the walls from one wagon to the other wagon. But again, they didn't do it across the street. All of the wagons were parked on the same side of the street, but there was some space between one wagon and the other. And the Levi was standing actually under the Rishus HaRabim, and he was schlepping the beams from here to there. So he was going over the Rishus HaRabim. The Chol HaGola has a din of Rishus HaYachid, as we'll see in Perek Yudal. But that the Moshe is chayiv, if it's exactly the way it was done in Ba'avodas Ba'amelachas HaMishkan, that they were both on the same side, one behind the other, one in front of the other. Understand? They were lengthwise. Like these wagons that as we were traveling through the desert, one was behind the other. So it was over the Rishus HaRabim on the same side of the street. That means opposite one the other. Think about this case, guys. You forgot. Here again, we'll differentiate. Forgetting or bemezid. And your hand is filled with fruits. Dina's case. And you're taking it out of your yard, you're giving it to your neighbor. By the way, this case is not your case. This case is that you're going over the Rishus HaRabim. So what did we say? We said that if my house, imagine there's my house, there would be some space in between the two Rishuis. In the case we would have it in a Rishus HaRabim, that's what we're not allowed to do it. I can't put it in the other Rishus HaYachid. But prior to me bringing it into my neighbor, I realized, I'm not allowed to do it. And I realized that while my hand was within the 10 tefachim, which is the worst case scenario. So the din is, I'm allowed to bring it back to me.
You extend it.
And I bring it back.
Right now, and then you put it back.
No problem, because I did nothing. I made an akira in my Rishus HaYachid, and I made a hanacha in my Rishus HaYachid. Didn't do anything bad. Because I should not do what I intended to do. I wanted to put it down over there. We said we're not allowed to do that. However, that's all because it was a shogeg. I'm allowed to bring it back. If you ever got punished, that was my day punishment in Cheder. Go stand in the corner and pick up your hands and leave it up. Where did they get it from? From this din? This is all from God. Not in the case of the Cheder, but in this case. But if you extended your hand, amazing. I know I'm not allowed to give it to my friends. but I did tshuva in the middle. No, you're going to pay your price for this tshuva. You can't bring it back. They gave you a penalty that what? Stay yodoi teluya. You let your hands stay hanging until it gets dark. Halacha chafal. That fixes everything. Hamschavin lizrek shmeina amas. All about machshava. If I intended, listen to this logic, guys. This is amazing. I wanted to throw something 8 amas b'Rosh Hashanah. And it happened to be that I'm a terrible thrower. And it landed, first case, before the 8 amas. But it went 4. I'm gonna be chayiv. Why am I chayiv, guys? I'll tell you why. Because if I wanted to throw it 8, 4 is included in the 8. Sharei nasa shir hamalacha plus. V'nasas machshavto. What you want to happen. Shahadavar yadua. It's no. That something cannot go to the end of 8 if it doesn't previously go by the 4. Because if you want to go to New York, you want to go to the Grand Canyon, you want to go there plus. So you can't say it wasn't your intention. But in the opposite, if your intention was to throw it 4, which is your intention was to do a biblical malach, happened to be that you overthrew it. You didn't intend for, that's the pshat, you didn't intend for it to land there. Then on a biblical level, you're not chayiv. Potter. And the culture, not only did you not think it should pass over, you didn't want it to rest. If you threw something, your intention was, I want it to land there wherever, then you're going to be chayiv. Wherever is called kavana. It's like when you play pool, the way I play pool. You don't have to aim to the hole, then you'll never get ever. Anything should get it anywhere. That's called that was your kavanah. If you threw it within 4 amas, which is not a problem biblically, and it happened to roll chutz la'arba amas. But same idea. Why? Because you did not have kavanah, right, for a zrika of chiyuv. If you threw it beyond arba amas and then it rolled back in, gavaldik. So like this. If it rested al gabe mashu chutz la'arba amas. Now, what does resting mean? I think a second, a moment. And then it rolled back in your chayiv. But if it didn't rest, we call that bouncing. That's what the Rambam means. It means if I'm standing in a Rishus HaYachid, and there's a wall but a Rishus HaRabban, and I'm playing what's a game of ball, whatever that's called in London, that was the whole entertainment. They whack the wall and get the ball against the wall, it would bounce back. The other guy has to get it. So since it never rested, it bounced back, then you're potter. You're not allowed to do it, but you're potter. The Simcha, we are beginning today's final chapter. Today's final chapter has the Perek Yudalet has 24 halachas, and finally we're going to be learning about the definition of the Arba Reshuyos. Really, the Reshuyos that are Machayev is Reshus HaYachid and Reshus HaRabim, and there are a Reshus called the Carmelis, and then there's a Reshus called the Makam Petur, and that will be this chapter. Perek Yudalet halacha Aleph says Rambam Arba Reshuyos l'Shabbos. There are 4 domains that are part of Hilchos Shabbos. In regard to the malacha of Haitzah, what we call a private domain, Reshus HaYachid, what we call the public domain, Reshus HaRabim, what we call the Carmelis. There are various interpretations to the word Carmelis. Let's go with one, that Almana, Ke Almana. Al-Almana is not a maiden, nor she's married. Nishtaher, Nishtahin, not a Reshus HaYachid, not a Reshus HaRabim, and they mark in Ptur. Now, let's go one by one. It's always L'Hoyer the Seder. The Seder is to be explained. Normally, the Chacham says, Al Rishon Rishon, there's no greater Chacham than the Rambam, but for some reason, first he says Reshus HaYachid first, but when he's defining it, he's beginning with Reshus HaRabim. Ezi Reshus HaRabim, Midbarois, big Chiddush this, Shittas Rambam. Now, when the Yidden were in the Midbar, that's one thing. Many Rishonim hold that a Midbar is a Carmelis. The Rambam says a Midbar is a Reshus HaRabim. The Yorim, forests. Only the Reshus HaRabim because there were Kriyos Mitzrayim in there. The Rambam doesn't say that. It's a big topic. Now, guys, I know that in our Rambam here it says the word fields. Big machlok is whether the Rambam wrote this over here. Many are of the opinion that the Rambam wrote over here the words ayoroi, cities. Okay. And not only the cities, but the highways going in and out of the city. The thoroughfares, that means streets that are open. The Rambam doesn't write that it has to go straight, but the Rambam writes regarding these roads that are going into the city. Every road needs to have a width of 16 amas, which, by the way, our roads here in America have that width, but it's considered a wide road. and it should not. There should be no roof over the road. What doesn't the Rambam mention? K'yoytze Mitzrayim. Be aware that's very big. What's a Reshus HaYachid? A Reshus HaYachid has nothing to do with ownership. In other words, when it comes to other halachas in the Torah, what I mean, a private domain is it belongs to a private person. Nothing to do with that. It's an enclosed area. Now, an enclosed area means either an area within walls or the whole area is built on top of a little mound. If there is a tail, if there is a mound that has the height of 10 tefachim, now 1 second, we have to go into a detail that Rambam is going to write later. There are many areas that the incline is very subtle. So even though eventually you hit 10 tefachim, which isn't that much, if it's a very slight incline, it won't be included in this halacha. We'll learn about the criteria for that soon. But if there is a steep mound and the top of it is 10 tefachim and the Rachav Arba'ah with a hay. Remember that people confused because you have the Dalad Amas for the Shusarabim. For these dinim, it's 4 tefachim. Once you get into it enough time, you don't get confused, hopefully. The Rachav Arba'ah tefachim, so it's 10 tefachim high, 4 by 4 tefachim. Or more, that's when it's up. Same thing if it goes in the ground.
Max, how big it can be?
No max, that's Fika. If it's made for a living area, no max. That's a more correct answer. If it's not made for a living area, we'll learn about this. Or if it's in the ground and it's deep, 10 tefachim or more, and it's wide, 4 by 4 or more. And now v'chein is a place that's surrounded with 4 mechitzas. How tall must a mechitza be? 4 tefachim tall. What's the inner space within the walls? 4 by 4 tefachim or more. What's the maximum space? As Tzvik says, the Rambam Tzvika, even if you have kamamilin, if it was surrounded for what halacha considers for you to live in there, that will exclude certain storage areas. If it's beyond the karpef, remember that? We're going to learn about. Okay. Like a Medina. A Medina, guys, it means a whole city. City's public domain. Doesn't matter. If you have a city that's surrounded with walls. Now, cities people have to go in and out. So these are cities that Rambam says that the walls are closed at night, not potentially closed. That Rambam writes, the whole city is called a Reshus HaYachid. Or you have a mavi. Now, a mavi will be a lot connected to Hilchas Erevin, but the Kitzur, you had then off the main thorough streets that were the Shusarabim, you had cul-de-sac. So you had these alleyways, and they are closed from 3 sides. And not only that, but the place where it opened up to the public domain had a lechi or a koida. We'll speak about this in the Chosed, but there's not enough time. There was some other stick that's going up, or there was a cross beam going length, going widthwise. The chein, chatzed, or if you have a courtyard. Dir means a corral. Dir is where animals run around freely. Or you have a sad. A sad is a stable, so it's already a closed room for an animal. If shehuk for ladira, that's called ladira. Kulam reshus hayachid gemurahe. Halacha base.
If you're saying by a city that if the walls, even if there's a mavoi over it,
No mavi. If the city has walls and it's closed at night, the whole city is reshus hayachid.
if it doesn't close at night, but it has a mavoi, that's not enough.
We didn't say that. We didn't do the halacha base. Afilu kelim, even vessels like a ship, like a boat, or a migdal shel eitz, a big wooden closet, or a beehive. Think about a beehive. In other words, it's a keli. The beehive. Well, if the wall of the beehive is 10 tefachim, which is not that much, it's a big beehive, and inside is 4 by 4 tefachim. Even though it's in the public domain, putting something in it is putting something in a reshus hayachid. In yesh from arbal avik that's a reshus hayachid gemura. No, you can argue the keli estate is not stationary. I don't care that it's not stationary. Halacha 3. It's good that the room is cold. If whoever is falling asleep, make a couple of dance a little bit. If inside the walls there's 4 by 4 tefachim, how do we view the crevices within the wall? So you have to know in which direction is it open to. The ones that are open to the Reshus HaYachid is Reshus HaYachid. If it's opened up, why? Because if the walls make the area within the walls into a Reshus HaYachid, so the wall itself, avad is a Reshus HaYachid. Okay? Now, Avid Reshus HaYachid, What about the airspace going up? So here's the big difference. Avir Reshus HaYachid, until the heavens is Reshus HaYachid. The airspace above Reshus HaRabim is only a Reshus HaRabim for 10 Tfachim. Remember that. Avir Reshus HaYachid ad l'Rakia, until you hit the heavens. Aval Avir Reshus HaRabim, that's why I cannot build over your private property. Even if you have a little house, and I'm going to build what they call these mansions over here that people love, the palace, and I cannot build over your property. Aval Avir Reshus HaRabim, it's only Reshus HaRabim until 10 Tfachim, which is so little. Above 10 Tfachim, right? Ma'asara ba'avir Reshus HaRabim is called a Makom Ptur. Wow. Okay. Now let's go to the next one. What's a carmelis? Eze carmelis. Tail sheyesh ba'abal arba. If there is this mound that has the 4x4 Tfachim or more, but it's not higher than Tfachim. But it cannot be within 3 of the ground, because if it's within 3 from the ground, then it'll have a din of love of that ground, whether it's a Reshus HaYachid or Reshus HaRabim. So it's from 3 until 10. It's very important, because once you're going to go beyond Asara Tfachim in a Reshus HaRabim, what will that be? That will be a Makom Ptur. Okay? Or I'll tell you, or more than 4x4, and it begins. It's not within if you're going down 3 Tfachim from the ground. It's 3 or more than 3, but only until 10. If it would be 10, what would that be? A Reshus HaYachid, but it's not 10. It's a place that's surrounded by 4 walls, but the walls themselves are 3 Tfachim high or more, but they're not 10. They're a little less than 10. In the area in between them has 4x4, that's called the carmelis, right? And look at me. If the area in between has less than 4x4, what do we call that? A Makom Ptur. If you have a little corner, a little nook that's near the Reshus HaRabim, that's going to be also a mavi, but just the beginning of a mavi. But there's no lechi, there's no kaida. It's surrounded by 3 walls. 3 walls, 10 Tfachim and taller. But the 4th side is completely open. That's the mavui that we'll learn about in Hilchos Eidevin that doesn't have the lechi, doesn't have the kaida. Or seas, bodies of waters, or valleys, even though people are walking through it, or when people are not walking through it, which is summer or winter, all of these are considered the carmelis. Halacha 5, the airspace of a carmelis is only like a carmelis up until 10 Tfachim. L'mayla ma'asara, in the airspace above an carmelis, is like the avir of a Reshus HaRabim beyond 10, and that's called a Makom Ptur. Lefikach, and therefore, so now that we established that a body of water, like the Pacific Ocean, is a din of a carmelis, the air on top of the water of a sea or of a river, has a din of a carmelis. But if you go into the ocean, you don't say that if you are lower beyond 10 Tfachim in, it's a Makom Ptur. In the sea, all the way down until the earth, has a din of a carmelis. Halacha vav. A storage vat in a carmelis has a din of a carmelis, even though it's thick 100 amas. Im ein by arba'a. That's important, because what would be the din if it has arba'a by arba'a? What would it be? It will be a Reshus HaYachid. Reshus HaRabim shoysallah tikra. Also, if you have a Reshus HaRabim that has a roof over it, or she'ein berach b'sheish esrei amma, or the only criteria missing is that fact that it's not 16 amos wide. That also has a din of a carmelis. Another din. It's the shebein amudim v'ayim Reshus HaRabim. It was common that when people would sell wares, they would display them in the public domain. But sometimes in the public domain there would be these pillars, and on the pillar they would put some sort of platform. So this platform has a din of a carmelis, even though it's in the Reshus HaRabim area, but it's a platform. See the Reshus HaRabim, big machlekes, what that means. It's not your normal sidewalk. It's not an area that people walk through with ease. It's a certain area off to the Reshus HaRabim that only bedoiche can you get there. Has a din of a carmelis. Avol beinu amudim, but the areas in between the pillars that everyone regularly walks through when they're walking to the Reshus HaRabim, hoyel v'rabim dorsim b'neim arim Reshus HaRabim. It has to do if something is adjacent to the public domain and everyone, when they're walking, walk there, which would be a sidewalk. But then sometimes you have like here, you have in front of the store, people can walk into that little nook. That's called a carmelis. Halacha zayin, what's a Makom Ptur? Like this, makom that is less than 4x4. And it's 3 Tfachim or more above the ground. Until where? Until the heavens. Why does it have to be 3 or more? Because any location that's 3 or less within the ground has the din of that ground. Afilu kutzim ubarkonim, even different types of bushes, right, that are very uncomfortable to touch. They're filled with spikes. Or you have manure. That's b'reshus harabim. So we say that if it's high off the ground 3 tvachim or more, if the top of it doesn't have 4x4, it's a makam p'tur. You know what you would say today, makam p'tur, a mailbox. The top of a mailbox doesn't have 4 by 4 tvachim.
Fire hydrant?
A fire hydrant, very good. It's a groove. Right, this is in the Reshus HaYachid, in the ground. If you have an area that's surrounded, but inside that surrounded area with walls, you don't have the 4 by 4, even if it's 1,000 mil long, right? But its width, you don't square it. If the width is not 4, it's 4 minus a barley bean. You understand? Not like a Hilchas Mezuzah that Rambam Paskin, the 4 amas by 4 amas can be squared. Not over here. Every direction has to have at least 4 tvachim. That's called the Makam P'tur. The ear above the Reshus HaRabim, the ear space above a carmel, above 10 tvachim is by the Makam P'tur. Okay, now we got that. Halacha ches. Exception. Any place that has exactly 10 tvachim above the ground. So they had it commonly then. Even though it's like there's a beam in the ground of the Reshus HaRabim, and it has a top, but it's exactly 9 tvachim above the ground, and people would commonly use it when they're walking with a backpack to adjust their stuff on it. They would put it on it, and they would adjust it. That has a din of a Reshus HaRabim. And I don't care how big is the oirech and roichet. That means that even if it doesn't have 4 by 4, it's not a makam p'tur. It's considered a Reshus HaRabim. Because when there is an area in the public domain that the public are using to adjust their wares, that has a din of a Reshus HaRabim. But if it's a little bit taller than 9 tvachim or a little bit less than 9 tvachim, then that was not commonly used for people to adjust their stuff.
He says 9, he's also 8%, right?
No. If it's less than 9, even a drop, but then if there's 4 by 4, it's a carmelis. If it doesn't have 4 by 4, then it has a din of a makam p'tur. Now, what happens if you have houses that are lower than the level of the street? That happens in any hilly area. And therefore, it's possible that right adjacent to the public street, there is the roof of the house from the other block. Do we say that if people use it to adjust their wares, on the same level, they put stuff down there, does it have a din of a Reshus HaRabim? And it depends whether it's discernible whether people see that this is private property. So here's it. If the top of a roof is on the same level, more or less, of your public domain, or it's within 10 tvachim, so if people are using it, you can't carry on that roof. Even though it's really a Reshus HaYachid, because people are using it as a Reshus HaRabim. So what do you need to do? In America, you put up a sign, private property. Here, what you did is that you would have to have a ladder that's left there Shabbos on the weekday. When people are in the public domain, if they can see that from the roof there's a ladder going down onto a yard, they'll see that this roof belongs to a yard. That's enough. Next thing, Amud Reshus HaRabim. You have a pillar that's in the Reshus HaRabim. Even though it's planted into the public domain, the top of that pillar has a din of a Reshus HaYachid. Now, why is it a Reshus HaYachid? Because it's 10 tvachim off the ground. Guys, here's the pillar, and somewhere in the 10 there is a peg sticking out, and people in the Rabbim are using that peg to hang something up. You only measure the 10 tvachim above the peg. So this lowered the height. Even if it's not 3 tvachim above the ground. Since that's a peg which allows people in the public domain to use, that diminishes the height of that pillar. You don't measure from the ground. And therefore, if it doesn't have the 10 tfachim height, from the peg up, there's only less than 10. The top of the pillar is 4x4. That's a carmelis. And therefore, if there's many pegs, every peg you only measure from the highest peg up. What about like we mentioned before, holes in a wall? So which way is it facing? So the holes in the wall that's facing the Rosh Hashanah has the name of Rosh Hashanah, but we don't say it the other direction. But if there's a hole in the wall that's open to the Rosh Hashanah, it's accessible to the Rosh Hashanah people. We don't say it has the name of Rosh Hashanah. It depends on the size of the hole, whether it's going to be a din of a carmelis, whether it's a makom patur. As the Rambam explains, Ketzad. Why is it accessible to the Rosh Hashanah? Because it's open to the side of the Rosh Hashanah. If there is 4x4 and it's above the ground 10 tfachim, that's a bona fide Rosh Hashanah, which is worst case scenario. Because that means if you're going to put something in there from the Rosh Hashanah, that's a yechayif. If the hole is 4x4, but it's not 10 tfachim off the ground, that's a carmelis. Also, patalav. If he doesn't even have 4x4, that's called a makom patur. All of this is only if the hole is 3 tfachim or above the ground, because if the hole is within 3 tfachim off the ground, if it's accessible to the Rosh Hashanah, it will have a din of a Rosh Hashanah. Halacha Yudalef, Rosh Hashanah and a makom patur. Now that we established these 4 domains, okay, now what? So let's go. Rosh Hashanah and a makom patur, you are allowed to transfer within it. Even if the area inside it is many million, makom patur can be many million. We just said that because you don't square it off. If it needs to have the oirech and the roichav of 4 tfach. So if the roichav is 3.9, I don't care if the oirech is long with the golos. Makom patur, and you can carry the taltal the kula. Avol Rosh Hashanah v'karmelis, as we learned 2 chapters ago already. In the taltal about ela ba'arba amas. The im have it oy hoishet oy zarik chutz la'arba amas. The Rosh Hashanah you're chayiv. That is mipi hashmua. In the carmelis, you're not allowed to do it. But if you did it, you're not going to be punished on a biblical level. Patur she'isar carmelis midivrayim. And you might confuse it with the Rosh Hashanah, but in other words, really, it can be like a Rosh Hashanah. Now let's compound. If you did not need to have the item moved to place B from place A, you only want to remove it from place A because there is a danger, like there is a thorn that's laying in the carmelis, and you want to move it in the carmelis. So since the Isur to begin with is only rabbinic, Nachamal, we're learning that the rabbis L'chatchila were not goyzer. In our case, we learned yesterday by Makom Tzad, right, by the louse, or 2 days ago. Now we're learning about the moving it for Hezek. And even if you moved it many yamas, v'chein chol chayotze b'zeh, halacha yud beis. Kashem shemut l'talta b'chol makom tur, just like you are allowed to carry something from one place of this Rishus HaYachid to another place in this Rishus HaYachid, kach mutar l'hachnes mimenu l'Rishus HaYachid l'Rishus HaRabim, ve'ein tzarech leimer l'karmelis. From a makom patur, you are mutar to go from a makom patur to a Rishus HaYachid, mutar to a Rishus HaRabim, and zicher to a karmelis. And similarly, from a Rishus HaYachid, from a Rishus HaRabim, and from a karmelis, li makom patur, guys, not patur, mutar. Halach Yud Gimel. Kshem she'asal l'tatal b'chol ha'karmelis, kach asal lo hitzim mimenu l'Rishus HaYachid, oy l'Rishus HaRabim, oy l'hachnas l'karmelis l'Rishus HaYachid, oy l'Rishus HaRabim, and therefore im hoitzi v'yechnis patur. Patur means you're not going to be punished, but you're asal midrabanan. Halach Yud Daled. Hamoitzi m'Rishus HaYachid l'Rishus HaYachid, oy m'Rishus HaRabim l'Rishus HaRabim, v'karmelis be'emsa. You're going to be patur. Now, guys, I just want to make it clear again. That's if there is less than 4 amas in the combined Rishus HaRabim. We already had it. So if you took something out from a Rishus HaRabim into a karmelis, what did you do, guys? You violated the rabbinic. And now you took it from the karmelis into a Rishus HaYachid. Had you gone from the Rishus HaRabim to the Rishus HaYachid, you would be chayiv chatas. Here it stopped in the karmelis, or the other direction. And you put it there, so now it's stationary, and now you uprooted it from the karmelis and you brought it to the Rishus HaRabim. So you know what the din is? You're still only patur. We don't say that the whole malacha was done. No. Akira Hanacha ends it. Now there was another step.
You did two.
You did two derabbanans, not one deraisa. Two derabbanans don't make one deraisa. Very good. Halacha says above. You're carried from private to public, right? Problematic. But but you went through it, you walked through it, you didn't stop there. You didn't stop there, you're going to be chayiv. And as we learned today, even though the Rambam said you should be running, that's just to remind yourself not to stop. But really, if even walking is not called a hanach. If it flew through the airspace. Now, if you're standing in a makam tur, guys, listen to this. You're standing in a makam tur. So going back to your case, just to clarify before answering your question, you have to know where you're standing. When you're moving, where are you standing? So if I'm standing in the makam tur and I'm taking an item from a reshus hayachid or from the hand of a person that's stationary in the reshus hayachid, means I made the akira and I put it down with the reshus harabim. Or I put it down in the hand of a person in the reshus harabim. You know what the din is? It's going to blow your mind. You're pater. Wow. Because you're standing in a makam tur. We're in the other direction. And you're standing on the tur, pater. Now, halacha tezayin is good achis. So those of us who forgot Shabbos, but we still remember Sukkah. So now when we said the following, say it by heart, that what makes the top of a pillar, even if the pillar is planted in the public domain, what would make it into a private domain? If it's 4 by 4 and 10 tefachim or more above the ground. Let's say it's 10 tefachim above the ground and the top is 4 by 4 tefachim, but it's a pillar that goes down, it gets narrower as you get lower. So once you come closer to the ground, it doesn't have the 4 by 4. So it doesn't have 10 tefachim 4 by 4. It's only 4 by 4 in the top. There's a concept called good achis, which means is that we take the top width and ki'ilu, that width is going to be going down all the way to the ground. We extend the walls down. So it does have 4 by 4. The surface is 4 by 4, but in the bottom, if you were to measure the width and the length, it's not 4 by 4. Even if the yesh would go in other words, guys, if it would only get narrow, Danny, once it's in the ground, once it's within 3, then there's lavud. You don't have the lavud. Even 3 and more above the ground is not yet 4 by 4. So you would argue maybe the whole thing is not a reshus hayachid. It is. Good achis. And therefore, next case. Now we said about the Rambam began the reshus hayachid. If you have a mound, but here's the point: there has to be an incline that's considered a sharp incline. What's a sharp incline? That when you travel 4 amis, not 4 tefachim, within 4 amas, you went 10 tefachim high or 10 tefachim low. It's that steep or more. That's the key. Tail hamislaket. There is an incline. There's a mound, and goiva asara tefachim, and it's going up 10 tefachim within 4 amas. The entire mound has a din of a reshus hayachid, and therefore b'mzarek reshus ramanoch al gabav chayav. Halacha yud zayin. No, it's kind of reshus hayachid. If you have this kana, you have this reed, and the reed is 100 amas tall, right? And you threw something while you were standing in the reshus harabim, and it rested on top, you're chayiv. 1 second, what's the chiddush here? Remember, the reshus harabim, what's the airspace above the reshus harabim? The airspace above the reshus harabim only goes 10 tefachim. But the reshus hayachid airspace goes until the heavens. So if it landed under the reshus hayachid, I don't care how tall it is. Now another thing, there's another chiddush here. Where did this item go through? It went through a makam patur. Doesn't change anything. We just learned this right now because the akida was b'reshus harabim, the hanacha was b'reshus hayachid. The fact that it flew through a makam patur is nothing. You're going to be chayiv. Now let's go into another nuance. The tree is standing in the private domain, but its branches are hanging over the reshus harabim. The Zajac, the nach al noifoi. You are standing in the reshus harabim. It landed on the branches. Now, what is the branch? Do you say the branch goes after the ikar or not? The Rambam says we don't say that. That's here. Lakula. She'ein anoif oilach acharo ikad. For the people that think Gesha is garnish. It's not going to help you. You have to be your own. Just because you're coming out of. Vu shteis tu. Halacha yudches. Well, it helps, but it's not. Halacha yudches. No, it's kind of Reshus Harabim. If there's a reed, and on top of the reed there's a basket. Now, here it's not the pillar. We're not going to say good achas. The point is that the basket is not the reed. The basket taka has 4x4, but the reed doesn't. And the basket is way above 10. The Zajac menachal gabav pater she'ein Reshus Harabim ela ad asarom hazoy dekarba amos Reshus Harabim. You threw something, and instead of it landing on the ground, it's stuck on the wall. How do you view that? It's stuck on the wall. Is that called a hanocha? The nocha chayfetz because it was something sticky. For example, you threw fat or dough. So it depends. If it's stuck l'mayla masora tvachim, what's l'mayla masora tvachim, my friends? Makim ptur kizorik ba'avir. Yeah, it doesn't matter. That's the wall itself is separating something that's on the other side of it. But we already said that crevices that are accessible to the Reshus Harabim won't have a din of Reshus Hayachid, even if the wall is making the other side of the Reshus Hayachid. And here it's not in the wall; it's on the side of the wall. So if it's above 10 tvachim, it has a din of a makim ptur. If it sticks on the wall of matamasora tvachim, it has a din because then it's as if it's rested in the airspace. That's the word.
So higher than 10, it's
Makam Tur. Lower than 10 is Reshus Harabim b'chai. Zajac l'mayla masora v'noch b'choir kolshu. Right? Then it's not a Reshus Hayachid. You're going to be potter. Halacha yutes. Zajac kanay remech Reshus Hayachid. Here you have a stick, my friends, very long stick, and you threw it, and it rested upright. Now here's the challenge. Let's say I threw it from a Reshus Hayachid, and it rested in the Reshus Harabim. But the Reshus Harabim only goes until 10 tvachim. This stick is more than 10 tvachim tall. So the bottom is taka noch b'Reshus Harabim, but the other head is noch b'makim tur. I'm going to be potter. It's not mutter, even though we said from Reshus Harabim, Reshus Hayachid to makim tur is okay. But here, some of it is Reshus Harabim, but not all of it. Because it's higher than 10 tvachim. Another case, Zajac keli Reshus Hayachid Reshus Harabim. Now, if this keli, what did the Rambam paskin that a keli itself has a din of Reshus Hayachid? Guys, if the wall of your pots are 10 tvachim tall, and the inside of the walls of your pot are 4x4, even though it's stationary, it has a din of its own reshus. So what happens if that pot was that which was transferred? I threw the pot from a Reshus Hayachid to a Reshus Harabim, and that keli was big that it's 4x4 in the height of 10. You know what the din will be? Imagine I'm potter. So when nimtzam kemoitzim Reshus Hayachid with Reshus Hayachid.
So because it's only Reshus Hayachid, it can never be in the Reshus Harabim, basically.
Mamish, amazing. Even though it's not on the Reshus Harabim. Now the next halacha is going to be a boya dolay ifshata, and the Rambam now, as we'll see, is not going to be consistent. He will always paskin l'kula. What is the case? You have a boy that's 9 tefachim deep, and it's in Reshus Harabim. Guys, halt cup. What is the din of that boy? Karmelis. It's 4x4, but it's 9 tvachim. Now I went ahead and I lifted up the chunk of earth in the bottom. I'm not talking about the issue now of making charishet. We're focusing now on move. And now that I moved it out, once that's removed, this boy is a Reshus Hayachid, and I put it to Reshus Harabim. Guys, the Rambam will always be lenient. He won't be consistent. So maybe now you should say that you removed it from Reshus Hayachid. We don't say so. Because prior to me making the Akira, it was not a Reshus Hayachid. And now let's go like this. There is a boy, Hoya boy Asara. What's the din of the boy, my friends? Reshus Hayachid. And I threw something in it. I threw earth, not something. So the earth now is bottled because when it lands, it's going to remain there. And when it lands, it's now less than 10. Here I'm going to be potted. Here I will say that since
Consider like a
even,
original comments.
even though it prior to the Hanoch it was a Rishus HaYachid, but on the other hand, since Babasachas, when it landed, it now doesn't have the din of a Rishus HaYachid. Guys, that's the rule. Whenever there's a boya delay, ifshat on the Gemara, and the Rambam is paskening misafek lekula, you can be inconsistent. The Rambam is lekula in both directions. Now, it's not mutter, but it's not chayiv. Halacha chafal hazoyrik daf v'nochal gabi yesebus. So you're throwing, guys, if you'll hulk up here, from a Rishus HaYachid, and you have this plank, and it landed on pegs into the Rishus HaRabim, and as it landed, guys, since the plank is 4x4, it becomes a Rishus HaYachid. What did the Rambam say over here? The same concept. Yeah, but the same concept. So if we say Boim Ka'achas, I'm good. Because now, while it landed, I made another Rishus HaYachid. I'm not violating Yisod D'Oraisa. Again, we'll be lenient, and that's even if there was a keli on the plank. I feel like keli agabadav potter sheriasiyas amechitze im nuchas hakeli boim ka'achas the same above. Halacha chav. Another application. Boim shuama kasor. There's a deep boil. It's 10. Oh, guys, it's 8x8. It's 8x8. And all of that is Rishus HaRabim. What's the din of this boil? Rishus HaYachid.
Wait, 8x8?
Double the size.
Double the size.
Oh.
Now, the depth is 10. When I threw the plank in, as of now, I'm throwing it made Rishus HaRabim, Rishus HaYachid. It landed upright, actually divided the bite into two. Now, it was exactly 8x8. The plank itself has epis amashu of width. So now each side has a drop less than 4x4. Boim ka'achas lekula. Zajac machatzelas Rishus HaRabim, even if it's only a mat. And the chilka haboy berachboy lishnayim patim. Sharei im hanochas akli batla mechitzois v'nasa kol vakam em bochum ba'aralbo. Lachav gimel. No, it's a Carmelist. It's a Carmelist. Yeah. I take that back. It's Makam Torah. Thank you. Yeah. Makam Torah. Slicha. Halacha chav gimel. If you have a pit in the public domain, which is Omek Asara and 4x4, guys, what is this? At a Rishus HaYachid, and it's filled with water, and you threw something in there, and it rested on the water, you're chayiv. Why? Because she'ein hamayim mevatlan hamachitzes. Now, I do want to point out that we learned today that when you make a akira from something that's soft al gaba hamayim, the Rambam says it's not called a akira me'al moken. So this has to be figured out. Next, hoyim alipedes. If the pit was filled with produce,
Doesn't reduce the depth of the pit.
correct. Hoyim alipedes v'zarak l'toichai pater. In other words, water doesn't reduce the depth, but you know what? Peiros reduces the depth, and now it becomes a karmelis. So therefore, and guys, the final halacha of Dalit, the kak mayim, guys, there is in the Rishus HaRabim sometimes there were irrigation channels that had water walking through it, and people also walked through it, and it became muddy. What's the status of that little crevice in the ground? The kak mayim shu'ovim Rishus HaRabim, and people walk in it. Im ein ba'am kayasar tfachim. What normally we would say it has the status? We would say it has the status of a karmelis. We don't say that. We say it has a din of a Rishus HaRabim because people push it, walk through there. Whether it was wide,
Because it's more than 3 feet.
yes. No, if it's less than 3, abad the Rishus HaRabim. Ben shloy afilu arba amos. Ben shloy barach by. If it doesn't even have 4, normally what would that be? In Makam Tur, it's since Roit Ha'am Midalgim Olav, the Rambam was writing another Kiddush. Even though most people don't walk in it, but they're jumping over it. And some people walk in it. It's part of the Rishus HaRabim. It has a din of a Rishus HaRabim. However, if it's deep 10, now, guys, then since water goes through, it's a body of water. What's the name of a body of water? A karmelis. When is it a karmelis? If it has the width of 4 tvachim, because if it doesn't have 4x4, then it's considered a makim ptor. Mazel tov for today's 3 prakim. God willing to be continued.
That was like a review of the first.
That's a review of many
I
of.
thought Carmen's between 3 and 10.
But here, yes,
That's 10 deep. Wouldn't that make it just the other?
That's the finish. That because it's Rosh Hashanah, everyone's walking.
no. If it's deep than 10, no. Then if it's more than 10, it's a carmel, is because water goes through it. The Rakamayim. That's why.